one thing for me is the financial and long-term stability of the city. Really, a lot of it has to do with revenue sources. We don't get to hold our hand up and say it's our turn for plug in whatever business or restaurant or anything that you want. It has to make sense for them. So we need the financial part, but in order to get the financial part, we need the transportation. In order to get transportation, we need financial help from state, county. So I think it's more or less identifying kind of those major things that we want to see for the city, and then how do we tie them together and go about getting partnerships to help do that.
Welcome to Herrimanology,
the official podcast to keep up with Herriman City.
We'll take you inside the city, explore the latest news and updates, show you how your government operates, and discuss the issues that affect us all. Now, here are your hosts talking all things Herriman on Herrimanology.
All right, welcome to Herrimanology. It is Thursday, April 11th, and we're coming off a city council meeting from last night. A bit later than normal, but there was a lot of good discussion going on, and so we'll get into it. I'm John LaFollette, Communications Manager for the city, joined today by Councilmember Henderson from District 1. Thanks for coming in.
You bet.
So let's talk about some of the voting action from last night. We won't hit quite everything with the ones that, at least I think the public's going to care about the most. One of them was an approval for work on the Stillman well, and a bit of context behind that. The city has a bunch of different sources where we get drinking water from, and many of those are underground wells that are located in the city. Another one is from the Jordan Valley Water Conservancy District, comes from outside the city. The Stillman well is one of the wells that the city gets water from that about a year ago we noticed it was starting to produce less water in the drinking system. Right. So what was that whole discussion and the approval for?
Well, I guess maybe this dovetails with our water rate discussions recently. So this is just one well of, I'm not even sure how many off the top of my head, but the flow rate, the amount of water we've been able to use from that well has decreased by about 50% over a period of time, and a lot of that is due to, for lack of, without getting into all the technical stuff that our water director gave us, the well's getting gunked up, and it needs to be cleaned out. And we're talking about 300 to 800 feet of a well that needs to be cleaned, and there's a specific process to do that. It came to us because it's a big ticket item. Council has to approve expenditures over a certain amount, and this one was over $800,000 to basically clean that well and get it producing more again. We did this about a year ago with another well, and it increased the flow rate by over 20%. So we're thinking we'll probably get that from this. The wells are an important part of our water system. We recently voted to start using more Jordan Valley water versus wells for all the reasons that we've been discussing. That comes at a heavy cost as well. It goes into the water rates, but we're going to continue to use the wells for secondary during the summer. And we need that flow rate to be higher to service those areas. So, yeah, $800,000 isn't easy to swallow, but that's built into the study we did on the water system and the things that need to be done to keep it going.
And that'll happen kind of in two phases based on where it's happening in the calendar. That well is needed for summertime peak demand, so part of it will happen by the end of May, and then we'll click pause on the work, and then the rest of it will get it finished up after the peak season and kind of in the winter time.
Yep. It takes a little bit more time to do that second phase where they really go in interest. So the first phase is they basically scrub the pipe and the filters, etc., the screening way down there, hundreds of feet. And then the second phase takes 12 to 14 weeks is what we were told, for chemical treatments and other things. So, yeah, we'll break it up so we can keep using that in the summer.
Another item, it turned into a lengthy discussion, but there's about 7 acres of property around 6400 West, 134th South-ish, that was a subject of a rezone proposal last night. Where did that start and where did that end up?
Oh, man. So we're getting fewer of these. As most people know, development and fighting high density is the main reason I got involved in all of this several years ago now. But we're seeing less and less of them. The city is getting close to build out. There's a couple big projects to be done, Olympia and Panorama, but those are kind of entitled areas. There's not a whole lot more of these decisions. So what we're going to see is things like this, where it's 7 acres, 10 acres of more or less infill. So this area is in what we affectionately call Old Town, and it's kind of an odd shape squeezed in there. But overall, the developer's plan looked pretty good, but what comes before the council is the legislative decision to change the zoning, right? So if it's currently zoned A1 agricultural 1 acre lots and they want to do something different, then they have to go through the legislative process, apply to change it, show their plans. They have to put in real money to go through the engineering and all those sorts of things. Then it goes to the planning commission, where they go through it and give the city council a recommendation based on kind of their purview, and then it comes to the council for a legislative decision where we look at it through a different lens than the planning commission. So that was our discussion last night, is does this fit with what we have planned, with our general plan, with the things that we see going on and other issues. The short of it really is, at least if I can say that the short of it is, we ended up approving the 11 lots that they want to build, which I think the smallest is just under a third acre. Yeah. So they're all larger lots in single family. There were 2 existing lots that they wanted to kind of preserve with existing homes and a little bit larger lots. So one went from A1 to A110. I won't bore you with the details there. The other one, where it took more time, was there was an existing lot close to an acre that they wanted to go to the new zone of R1, which, because we have an experienced council who's seen this before, we pushed back and said, why would we change that? It would entitle them to further subdivide without coming back through this process. So that's where the lengthy discussion ensued to get everybody on the same page, and ultimately we had them keep their zoning of A1, I believe is A143 is what it is. And if they ever want to rezone, they can come back through the process. Yeah. So I think the council did its job and caught something that wasn't caught through the rest of it, and was looking out for the residents.
To make sure that what the council saw, that was proposed, is ultimately what the city gets down the line. There was a nice part of the meeting. We do this periodically when new officers are sworn into the Herriman Police Department or promoted to different positions, a badge pinning presentation.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And our department is growing, so we are adding new officers as needed and as funds are available. It's a ceremonial thing, but it's fantastic to see them and their families. And as our department grows and tenure, we have advancements and things. It's just great to see that. I've said this before, as long as have done this and however long I may do it, breaking away from UPD and starting HPD will be my proudest achievement. It ruined my health and was an onerous process, but absolutely the best thing that we could ever do. Chief Carr and his team are fantastic, and they need to know that even though I'm the number one person who pushes back on any budget increases and taxes, I want to make sure that we not only have the best, but it's run properly and we don't get out over our skis. But yeah, fantastic moment for our police department and those officers and their families, and love to do that.
There was a discussion toward the end of the meeting about the next 10 years of the city. And the city council has a lot on its plate. Anybody who goes to a city council meeting or spends 10 minutes on the city's website, bless you if you do that. There's a lot to think about, and a lot of issues and a lot of decisions that have to be made, and only so many resources. What was that discussion about, and what was the purpose of it, and how is it going to come back maybe in future meetings?
Well, that's a great question. It was requested by and led by our city manager. It was titled as a round table of kind of just what is the council concerned about for the city in the next 10 years or so. And we have these discussions all the time. If anyone knows me, one of my biggest things is we have to have a little bit of foresight, right? Too many decisions, I think, are made in what's expedient right now without thinking through what it does down the line, whether it's land use, transportation, what money we commit now, all those sorts of things. But what the discussion was is, look, let's just throw out some bigger long-range topics as we've tasked our new city management, and I say new, really this current team's been in place, all of them about 12 months, right, with our new finance director and attorney and city manager, everything. So we've tasked them with kind of reconstructing how the city is operating in our long-term plans. So they're working hard on a strategic plan. So it was just high level. We didn't talk about solutions, just here's some of the major things that we're talking about or that we're concerned about, and it ended up with, I don't know, a list of 35 or 40,
a whiteboard full of
40 things. I think chief among them, I would call out a handful of things that really are affected by any of them that we put up there. And the number one thing for me is the financial long-term stability of the city, which then, as Councilmember Shields said, well, really a lot of it has to do with revenue sources, right? Well, we have to decide how to spend money, but we also have to create revenue sources. So I can only speak for myself, one of my long-standing things is we have to have a long-term strategy and realize that I affectionately call Herriman the cul-de-sac of Salt Lake County. No one comes here unless they live here right now, right? So it's hard to attract businesses. We don't get to hold their hand up and say it's our turn for a Trader Joe's. It has to make sense for them to want to be here. Plug in whatever business or restaurant or anything that you want. It has to make sense for them. And so we have to have proper transportation. So we need the financial part, but in order to get the financial part, we need the transportation. In order to get transportation, we need financial help from state, county, etc. So there's kind of this trickle-down effect. So I think it's more or less identifying kind of those major things that we want to see for the city, and then how do we tie them together and go about, to me, getting partnerships to help do that.
Yeah.
Another big part is balanced, and again, I'm a broken record on this, balanced land use, right? All housing, all sales tax generating commercial. Well, we can have fast food and gas stations on every corner, and that's not going to really move the needle for us, sales tax wise. We also need to have, I'll mention dentist offices and credit unions and banks. They pay property taxes, and commercial property taxes are twice what residential's are. And as far as that goes to the school district, that goes to our police and fire, and they don't require much, if any, of those services. So it helps that balance that land use. It brings people into those businesses who then go and shop at the stores or have lunch across the street. So it's kind of, I refer to it as an ecosystem. We need to balance that. We need employment centers. It's hard to get employment centers if there's not transportation. So we kind of can go round and round with all these things, but they're tied together, and we want to try to work on a cohesive plan to try to tick some of these boxes and attract those things.
Yeah, and as much as we'd like to, the city can't, you kind of mentioned this, the city can't force very much of that. We can influence, we can build relationships, we can request funding, but there's only so much the city can control.
And the only incentive that we can give a business is the thing that we want from them, which is sales tax. That literally is the only thing we can give them, is the sales tax that we want to collect from them. So, and we've done that in some areas, but we can't do that everywhere. So there's only so much that we can control, and we're doing everything that we can.
Yeah. No Dumb Questions this week comes from Oscar, and he was asking, I don't have the exact quote in front of me here, I apologize, but he was asking basically, when is the end of Juniper Crest Road going to connect over to Mountain View Corridor? And I used to live in that area too. Something I know people in that area ask all the time. What is the situation there? And I don't know if we have an update, but maybe just kind of describe what's going on there.
My best answer is to describe the process. I think most people don't understand that the city does not build these roads. We don't have the money for it, as I just mentioned. That's just not how it works. It's developer generated. So as development continues there, they collect the fees to pay for those improvements. What has changed in that area now is that I mentioned Panorama. There's several different landowners. One developer's come in and tried to pool them all together to redo a development agreement where they would use a funding mechanism called the Public Infrastructure District. There's good and bad to that. I won't get into that. But by pooling those resources together and pooling that fund together, their proposal, and one thing that we would demand from it, is that they build the rest of Juniper Crest first. So they'll have the money, put the infrastructure in first, and then they can start building. As far as a timeline, it depends on us working out the kinks and all the details of that agreement, and then it's up to the developer how quickly they move.
Yeah, so can't put a pin in anywhere in the calendar exactly, but
we're closer now than we ever have been before.
That's a fair way to say it. And I want to mention one more thing. Next week is the annual spring cleanup, or biannual, depending on the year and the budget. We are doing, as a city, the spring cleanup this year. It runs Tuesday, April 16th through Saturday, April 20th. If you're a Herriman resident, you can go, as long as you can verify your residency, go to Butterfield Park, off the west entrance there from 6400 West. And there's a big list of approved items. You can find the full list on herriman.org/cleanup. And a really nice thing that the city does every year. Spring cleaning. It's people have some junk, and we can take a fair amount of it.
And we realize that it's not the ideal location, but it's the location that we have. For people like me that live on the north side of town, it's probably just as far to go straight to the dump as it is to go over to Butterfield Park. And if you're so inclined to do that, I believe we have vouchers from
Wasatch Front Waste.
From Wasatch Front Waste at the city. You can come in, same thing, show your residency, pick up one of those, and it probably won't cost you anything just to go straight to the dump either.
All right, that's all for this week.
Awesome.
Thank you, Councilmember Henderson, for coming in.
My pleasure.
And thank you for listening and watching. As always, leave a comment or a question on whatever platform you're listening and watching on, and we'll address it in an upcoming episode, and we'll catch you next time.